Mr. Secretary, I'm recognized and appreciate your testimony. Glad to see that you've recovered fully from COVID-19.
Thank you, Senator.
I want to thank you for the recent responsiveness to requests for information from the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. We face some challenges, and you and I have had some candid conversations about that. We've seen a marked improvement in the Department's responses to the Permanent Subcommittee. Grateful for that, and want to ask you for your commitment that that will continue, and that as the Permanent Subcommittee for Investigations continues its work, that we'll continue to see that kind of robust and timely response to our requests.
You most certainly will, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'd like to discuss with you the supply chain bottlenecks, constraints we're facing at major shipping container ports across the country. As you know, state of Georgia hosts the Port of Savannah, which is, depending upon how you count, the third or fourth largest port of its kind in the United States. It hosts the largest single container terminal in the United States, and like ports across the country and indeed around the world, we're seeing significant delays in the processing of inbound shipments and challenges. Want to ask you what steps the Department is taking as part of a broader federal response to ease these bottlenecks at shipping ports.
Senator, I'm very well aware of the challenge there. One measure that we have taken operationally is to increase the hours of operation, sometimes at a 24/7 clip, to facilitate easing the adverse consequences of the supply chain challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I was glad that the White House and the administration accepted my request that approximately $8 million be allocated to allow the Port of Savannah to rapidly scale up its operations, establish some auxiliary shipping container areas, make greater use of inland ports. I'm glad those resources are on the way, and I'd like to ask you for your commitment that the Department of Homeland Security, to the extent it's involved in those efforts, will move as rapidly as possible to support our efforts to expand capacity at the Port of Savannah.
We most certainly will, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. On a related note, in addition to hosting the fourth largest container port in the country, Georgia hosts the busiest airport in the world, as you know well, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And given the changes to COVID-19 related restrictions on entry to the United States, for example, from European countries, and the significant increase in domestic travel, there are real concerns about CBP capacity and TSA capacity at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, airports across the country. And I've heard from Delta Airlines, heard from the City of Atlanta, concerns about the ability to process entrants, for example, from European countries, tourists and business people who we want to be here and doing commerce in the United States, but we need smooth operations at our airports. And so my question for you, Mr. Secretary, will you please designate someone in the Department who can speak with major stakeholders like Delta Airlines, like the airport leadership, the City of Atlanta, just to make sure we're all on the same page about the airport's needs, the operators' needs, the carriers' needs, and to have an open line of communication about what else the Department might be able to do to smooth operations and reduce traveler wait times, both domestic travel, encountering TSA lines, and international travelers at the airport.
Senator, most certainly, and I can identify those individuals right now.
Please.
Troy Miller is the acting commissioner of CBP, very experienced. He grew up in the organization in the Office of Field Operations, and William Ferrara, who now leads the Office of Field Operations for CBP. On the TSA side, I would recommend Administrator David Pekoske and Darby LaJoy. These are individuals who are expert and have been very focused on staffing of the airport in Atlanta, of course, and all airports, big and small, across the country.
Great. Well, look forward to convening those two public servants with airport leadership, city leadership, Delta and other carriers, and making sure that we're all communicating well about not just meeting but anticipating the airport's needs as travel continues to increase nationwide.
Senator, I would be pleased to engage as well. This is something that we're very focused on. This goes to the prosperity of our country in receiving people for tourism and business purposes and other reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I look forward to working with you on that. My final question for you about U.S. Coast Guard. Had the pleasure of meeting with the 7th District Command, as well as meeting with enlisted personnel, enlisted U.S. Coast Guard personnel, and hearing from them their needs, their concerns. I have such immense respect for the extraordinary men and women of the United States Coast Guard, as I know you do, for the work they do every day to protect the country, to prevent illegal fishing, to enforce our immigration laws, to respond to natural disasters, provide search and rescue services to Americans who need help. They are amazing people, and I commend the U.S. Coast Guard for the extraordinary work they do. I have heard from, especially enlisted Coast Guard personnel, about the difficulties that they're having with affordable housing and child care. And so what I want to ask you is that someone from your team will work with mine to map out whether there are some solutions that we can find working together to ensure that Coast Guard personnel, and especially those younger junior enlisted personnel, have access to affordable housing and to child care services. There's a discussion we can perhaps have about the base housing allowance. I know that gets into some complex issues involving the Department of Defense as well. So I'm not asking you for a specific policy commitment, but your engagement and your staff's engagement in working together to address some of these quality of life and kitchen table, pocketbook issues for especially those young women and men who are keeping our country safe through their service in the Coast Guard.
Thank you so much, Senator Ossoff. And let me share with you that pursuant to the bill that President Biden signed into law yesterday, $434 million, I think is the figure, will be dedicated to the United States Coast Guard. And part of that money will be to address some of the quality of life issues to which you now refer, housing, child care, and alike. That is just one example why the bill that the President signed into law, and it's a bipartisan bill that the President championed, and so many others, is such a monumental chapter in our American history.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I agree with you completely. And, you know, despite the partisanship of many of these hearings, I want to again point out that that infrastructure bill, which will support airports and ports and our Coast Guard, was bipartisan, showing that the political parties can rise above partisanship and put the national interest first. Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Senator.
We will now take a short 10-minute recess to allow senators to vote. When we return, Senator Cotton will be recognized for his first round of questioning. Any senators requesting a second round may ask their questions following Senator Cotton.